see you guys in the dark.
I love camping. Anytime my friends and I come home from college, we would load up our cooler with beer, grab some gear, and go screw around outside. Unfortunately, when I was actually at school, none of the sorority sisters or other friends ever wanted to go with me, so I would often suffer withdrawals from camping. One day the weather was way too nice to waste, so I grabbed some of my gear, hopped in a car that I borrowed from a buddy, and drove to a spot that was secluded, yet within a safe distance to civilization that I could run and get help if needed. Camping also creeps me out sometimes, but that creepy feeling is also somewhat of a plus for me. It's the same reason that people read these stories. It's fun to be scared. So I make a little camp and get a fire going. I hadn't brought all that much to eat, but I was enjoying myself, reading and looking around the area, that sort of thing. I got the feeling that I was being watched, and I stopped dead in my tracks. I hear a twig crunch over to the right of me. Then I see a doe bolt from 100 feet or so in front of me. I laughed at myself and went back to the camp with an armful of wood that I had gathered. I kept freaking myself out, hearing sounds just outside of the ring of light cast by the fire. I also get inside my head, so I shrugged it off and kept whittling at a stick that I had been messing with. Around 1, I decided to go into my tent and snuff out the lantern. I'd been slamming beers in the most unladylike fashion and smoking cheap cigars. It's another reason that I like camping. I can act however I want, and no one can bother me. So I passed out relatively quick. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I start hearing footsteps. They sound pretty light and sort of timid. I think to myself that it's a deer or just another animal, more likely a raccoon because I had probably left some food out. I'm still on my guard though. About 30 minutes of sleeping with one eye open, I hear a rubbing noise, and the tent fabric is being pushed in a bit. I don't know how I didn't chip my sleeping bag, but I just sat there, paralyzed with a K-bar in my hand. I desperately wanted to thrust my knife through the tent fabric, but I was still holding out hope that it was just some of my buddies from a frat joking with me. And then, as suddenly as it began, it all had stopped. I was starting to feel slightly more secure because daylight would be coming in about 2 or 3 hours, but I sure as shit wasn't going to go to sleep. All of a sudden, at about 4 o'clock, I realized I should put my boots on so that if anything did happen, I would be ready for it. After having stayed up and keeping alert a little while longer, my friend's car alarm goes blaring. I freaked the fuck out. I run out of the tent. I got about 2 steps before something had grabbed me around the mouth. I opened my mouth to scream, but instead the person's pinky finger slips between my teeth. I've heard that people can perform superhuman feats when they have huge adrenaline rushes. In my case, I just clamped down. There's really no way to say this without sounding ridiculous. His finger had popped off. He screamed, pull his hand away, with the missing digit falling to the ground. He took off running down the hill that I was camping on. I took off right quick in the opposite direction. I must have looked ridiculous to the people whose house I ran to. A little sorority girl in a wife beater, boxers, and steel toed boots. I also had some blood that had oozed out of my lip, not from the finger, but because I also managed to take a pretty good chunk out of my lip as well. I told them exactly what happened. They called the police and got me some real clothing, and the man at the house made me a whiskey and a coke. When the cops got there, they checked it out. The cops went to go check it out, and when they came back, it was light out. They brought me back so that I could get my friend's car, and what I just saw made me more scared. Right next to the tent was a red gas can. He could have just lit me on fire earlier. The finger was also gone, suggesting that he had come back to get it. The kicker is they never caught the guy. So somewhere out there is a man sitting down to dinner, maybe alone, maybe with his wife and a couple of kids, and he's missing his right pinky finger. I worked summers as a camp counselor in the northern part of Ontario. When this particular incident had occurred, I was camping with a group of 10-year-old boys on the same lake that the summer camp was based on. So, like a routine camping trip, we canoe out onto the site and then set up our tents. Me and my co counselor, Mike, take turns supervising the kids while they swim, build forts, and play games. We cook some food over the fire, sit around and tell stories, cook some s'mores. Typical Canadian camping experience. So around 9:30ish, tell the kids it's time for bed, and they head into their tents, which were positioned a small walk from the shoreline, but still on a line of sight where we had the fire pit. So the kids have gone to bed. Me and Mike are shooting the shit by the water, smoking a cigarette, just basically hanging out before we decide to head into our tent and call it a night. What happened next still troubles me to this very day, It remains my go-to scary campfire story. We're both gazing into the pitch black night water when we saw a small light approaching us, slowly and slightly over water level. We speculated that it would possibly be for a few minutes. Before it came close enough for us to see what it was mounted on top of the front of a kayak, and that someone was approaching our campsite. Now, it is important to note that as a camp counselor, part of our training goes over how to deal with strange encounters or strangers in an environment where we are responsible for a group of children on public property. I was prepared to give him the typical speech about how we are camping with a group from a recognized organization, and we would respectfully ask that they find another campsite. However, this person's appearance shook me to the bone as the light drew nearer. Paddling this kayak was a woman who looked to be in her 60s. She had incredibly long wisps of gray hair that was trailing in the water. Her skin looked like old leather, and her dead-looking eyes were tough to spot under all her wrinkles. She looked directly at me, and when she spoke, I realized she was missing most of her teeth. "Are all of your children safe in bed?" she asked, pointing in the direction of the tents, not really knowing how to respond. And at this point, I was quite frankly shitting myself. I responded by telling her that they were fine, and she had to leave immediately. "That's good. Just as expected for this time," she said with a smile, then turned her kayak and paddled off into the night. At this point in time, myself and Mike were legitimately very creeped out, not only by the appearance of this mysterious woman who resembled a freaking corpse, but also her inquiry on the whereabouts and safety of the kids we had brought on this trip. Not knowing what else to do, we grabbed our hunting knives and sat by the fire after checking on the kids. Half an hour later, shit started to get really creepy. Across the lake, a female counselor was leading another trip for kids the same age group. She sent me a text which read something along the lines of, "Hey, Sean, stop screwing with us. This isn't funny. My kids are really creeped out by this." I instantly called her, let her know I had just seen someone near my campsite that seemed eerie, and that I was not trying to play a joke on her. Apparently, one of their kids had opened their tent door to take a piss, and then they had seen a woman with long hair standing with her arms open towards them near the shoreline. When I was 13, my parents sent me to an all-girls fitness camp so that I could become the best part of me that I can. Well, to be honest, it was a fat camp. It was really horrible. Bad food, all-day exercise, god-awful counselors. The camp took place on a college campus where they had us sleeping in dorms of 2 girls per room. I had high hopes that I wouldn't be a complete waste of a summer, as my roommate seemed like a great girl. We had similar interests and the same style. It seemed like a perfect match for me. We should chat all night, planning our escape from the camp, moaning about having to give up our cell phones, even though I would secretly sneak mine in sometimes, and talk about our families and how much they sucked for sending us here. I was surprised that she was even at this camp. She was actually pretty fit, and her parents had signed her up for the whole summer, versus mine only sending me for 2 weeks or so. 2 days into this place, I was pulled aside by another girl, who I had become close friends with, warned me that Mary had a lot of issues, and the reason my new roommate had been sleeping in a single for X amount of time was because no one else wanted her in their room. I had brushed it off, thinking it was just rumors and girls being mean. That day at lunch, Mary had seemed really mad at me, and I couldn't figure out why. So when I got a chance, I asked her what was up. She ranted at me about how everyone was so mean, and I was going to leave too. She just knew it. She went on to explain how this one girl she was rooming with switched rooms because she made friends with this popular girl, and that she made up lies to this popular girl. And silly me, I believed her. We continued hanging out, and only now do I realize how she was keeping me from hanging out with anyone else. Near the end of the first week, camp took us on a long walk over to the local pool. It was a really big deal, as it was super hot. This was only a once a week activity. Mary and I were super excited to go. When we had got there, we quickly claimed some chairs and left our stuff there. Mary had been at camp for several months. There was this stupid can you swim test that she didn't have to do. I assumed that it was mandatory at most camp settings, so we're separated for about 20 minutes or so. Thanks to the swim team that I used to be in, I had passed with flying colors. I jumped into the pool and started floating around. Heard her calling my name, saw her waving me over to the deep end of the pool. I had swam over, asked her what was going on. She said she wanted to show me something. Next thing I know, her hands are around my neck, and she's shoving me underwater. Now, I am a good swimmer, and I'm very capable of holding my breath for quite a long time, but never in my life had anything like this had ever happened to me. I panicked and opened up my mouth to scream. Luckily, before my mind had even processed what was going on, I had kicked up my legs and shoved her back and made a desperate escape. Somehow I managed to swim away, pull myself out of the pool. As I had caught my breath and began to process what just happened, I looked back at her. She was staring at me, not having moved. I grabbed my stuff and ran into the bathroom, and then called my mom. I was in tears as I explained to her exactly what happened. It was very obvious that she didn't believe me. I stayed in that bathroom until we left to go back to camp. I didn't leave the counselor's side the entire walk back. After we arrived back at camp, I was pulled aside by one of the women in charge. She was really rude and demanding that I give her my cell phone. I, of course, denied having one and asked why she thought that I did. She told me that my parents had called about some assault that had just happened to me, and they told me that I called. I quickly excused it, saying that I borrowed a phone from a lady at the pool. Thankfully, they bought that. They told me that I would have to be moved to a new room the next day, and that I had to spend the night with Mary one last time. Furiously, I begged them to please let me sleep on the floor of another girl's room. They insisted that I was being melodramatic. As soon as I was left alone, again I raced to the closest bathroom and called my mom. That's when I learned the truth about Mary. I wasn't her second roommate. I was more like her sixth, to stay in the room with her. Three of her roommates had left camp really early, and the other two had switched rooms at the first opportunity that they had. All the others had allegations of violence from Mary between them, but the camp refused to do anything about this, and insisted that she was just a troubled girl who wanted to make friends, or as they told my parents, well, she had some issues in the past. That night I didn't sleep at all, and neither did Mary. She was up all night staring at me. I could feel her watching me, and I was really terrified. I had my cell phone clutched in my hand with 911 dialed and ready to call at any moment. I practically cried when the sun had came up. That day, I was moved to a new room, in a different building, and somehow managed to break my foot in the process, so my parents had to drive up, took me home with a cast on my foot. To this day, I still have some issues from what that girl did to me, and I never have been able to live with roommates or make friends so easily now.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.